Shalom and welcome to the One Pasuk podcast, where the rabbis at Congregation Avas Torah each share an insight on one particular pasuk from the parsha and reflect on each other's ideas. Rabbinic banter, I like to call it. I am Chaim Pupko, and I am joined by my dear friends and teammates, Rabbi Daniel Goldberg,
Shalom,
and Rabbi Morty Kisus.
Shalom.
If you'd like to sponsor an upcoming episode, please contact the shul. All right, here we go. Our pasuk for this week, Parshas Vayishlach, Perek Lamed Beis, Pasuk Daled, chapter 32, verse 4, first pasuk of the Parsha. Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav el Esav achiv, Arza Seir Sedei Edom. Yaakov sends messengers ahead to his brother Esav in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. Now, Yaakov is returning to Canaan 20 years after he fled from Esav. When he left, he had nothing, and now he returns a wealthy man with wives and children and a large estate. And on his way back to Canaan, he sends messengers to Esav because he wants to reconnect, hopefully in peace and brotherhood. And I was thinking, if the Torah had a score, a soundtrack, I think the music in the background of Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim would be like that low-volume, suspenseful music, like it conveys a sense of danger that possibly lurks ahead.
Something ominous,
like Jaws. Dun-dun, dun-dun. And sometimes Jaws appears and sometimes he doesn't, right?
Right.
So that would be the background music for this pasuk.
Yeah, it's definitely a very tense moment. Okay, I'm actually going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to focus our attention on a comment of the Ramban that precedes this pasuk. It's his hakdama, his introduction to Vayishlach, reflecting on the entire episode of Yaakov's encounter with Esav. And the Ramban writes as follows: Nichtava haparsha hazos lodia. This whole story, why do we have it in the Torah? Why do we need to know about Yaakov's reuniting with Esav? To teach us two things: Ki hitzil HaKadosh Baruch Hu es avdo, v'ga'alo miyad chazak mimenu. That Hashem saves his servant and redeems him from those that are stronger than him. So Hashem protects his people. And also, ululamdenu, and also to teach us, shehu lo batach b'tzidkaso, hishtadel b'hatzala b'chol yechalto. That Yaakov, despite the fact that Hashem protects his servants, Yaakov did not rely on his own righteousness to save him. He didn't rely on Hashem to miraculously redeem him. Instead, he did everything within his power to protect his family and to engage in forms of diplomacy with Esav and prepare for contingencies in case they needed to run, in case they needed to fight. And it's a beautiful wedding of two things that we always are holding. Number one, a sense of profound faith in Hashem, that Hashem protects us, and we mean that earnestly when we say it. And at the same time, to do everything we can, to do our hishtadlus, to do what we need to do to provide for ourselves, to protect ourselves. And these things, they seem to be in conflict, but they're not in conflict. We can live with both of those things, and we must live with kind of both of those. And I'll just add another nekuda, which is the pasuk started, as we said, Vayishlach Yaakov malachim. Yaakov sends messengers, and Rashi says malachim mamish, literal angels. And what you see is like the story is happening almost on two planes. There's like a human plane, and there's a divine plane. And you can see them and map them onto each other. And they're not necessarily, you don't have to choose. Like he sends real messengers and he sent angels. And like these things were happening at the same time because he lived in this unified world of hishtadlus and also bitachon in Hashem.
That's one of my favorite lines, is that hishtadlut in general is muchrach. It's obligatory, it's required, it's necessary. Velo mo'il, but it doesn't help. Rabbi Diamond used to quote this once a month. Hishtadlut is muchrach. Velo mo'il. It's obligatory. We have to do hishtadlut, but it doesn't really help.
Wow, that's an incredibly high madrega to hold those two things at once.
It doesn't really help, or it's not the only thing. Meaning it's either Hashem or hishtadlus. Meaning, yes, you do your hishtadlus, but you still need Hashem at the same time. I mean,
no. Meaning
hishtadlus is nothing.
You go to the office and you think that, I'm investing the efforts and that's why I'm getting. That's absolutely not true.
Wow.
Nothing. Zero. It's muchrach, but it's velo mo'il. It doesn't help.
That's an incredibly difficult madrega to achieve. Yeah. Wow. I guess that is the most concrete or maybe extreme expression of what I'm saying, but you're saying it in like a very stark way that almost makes it like, wow.
Considering how profound your idea was, Rabbi, I wanted to bring it out in the starkest of terms.
I guess I'm sitting with that and thinking about that.
But then let me ask a question on that, and that is, wouldn't that demoralize or disincentivize someone from even trying?
How do you hold those two things?
It's all in Hashem's hands.
It's a tax, though. Meaning, you can't sit at home and say, oh, I heard the podcast, Hishtadlut is lo mo'il, so I'm going to sit on my couch, let me know when the check comes in the mail. No, it's mukhrach, there's a tax. When Adam HaRishon sinned, b'za'at apecha tochal lachem, God said every one of you will have to toil. Now, the emunah and the understanding of that always has to be that I went to the office, I was the one who closed that deal, but I didn't really close the deal. Hashem was the one who closed the deal. It's mukhrach. I was obligated. I had to go to the office. I had to sit in the traffic. I had to take all those calls. I had to fly to wherever to see the piece of property.
So it's like there's two realities, right? There's our reality in which we have to participate in this reality. We have to put in our ishtadlus, but there's another reality, and that's the true one, and that is Hashem's world, and Hashem is making all these decisions.
Absolutely. Our actions do not directly correlate to the result. So our actions are necessary for the result, but they don't correlate. So if you're looking at what actually triggered, if you had some x-ray vision or you're able to see from Hashem's perspective, so to speak, you would not see like, oh, because I went to the office, I got the paycheck. You would see you went to the office, check, you fulfilled your tax, your necessarily required efforts, but yet at the same time, velo mo'il, that's not what yielded the result.
So actually sheds a little bit of new light on something that I was going to discuss, because I prepared for the second week in a row the exact same thing that Rabbi Goldberg did, this introduction of the Ramban, which is kind of surprising because the implication of the Hakdama is that this whole story was unnecessary for the narrative of the Torah. Right, the story that we learn from when we're kids of Yaakov and Esav and wrestling, and he gets the name Yisrael. Like, how could you say this is totally unnecessary? Now, I'm not going to address that directly, but it all goes to show for the Ramban that this story is really meant to serve as the template for our encounter with Esav throughout history. That this is the formula, that when we have to face our enemies, our adversaries, when we have to face a world that is foreign or alien or hostile, we follow the model of Yaakov with tefillah, with doron and milchama, prayer. Doron, which I will loosely translate as diplomacy. It's not gifts and bribery. It's diplomacy. It's engagement. And the third, of course, is milchama, which is we have to defend ourselves. We have to defend ourselves, and sometimes that means physically, militarily. But listening to Rabbi Kisus, you could ask the following question. According to what the Ramban's saying, tefillah is hishtadlus, which, if you think about it independently, you might not say that. You might say hishtadlus is diplomacy and milchama and doing all the practical things. But the spiritual things, that's not hishtadlus. You're davening to Hashem. You're supposed to daven to Hashem, right? We typically understand hishtadlus as like doing our own efforts. But what's remarkable what the Ramban is saying is that no, tefillah is hishtadlus as well. Meaning, tefillah isn't, oh, Hashem save me. Hashem, you do it for me. Hashem, send me a miracle. Hashem, enable me. No. Tefillah is something we are responsible to do. Part of our engagement in this world, in this reality, isn't strictly through the physical and the practical and the material. Like, no. We have to engage with this world and with our lives spiritually. And we have to think about, even in the most practical, mundane things, we have to think about the fact that Hashem is watching over us and we need his assistance. And prayer is something that is meant to be embedded in our everyday lives. It helps us maintain that bond with Hashem. It helps us maintain our sense of emunah, and it helps us to confront these challenges. Now, it doesn't solve challenges. It's not like you daven and challenge is solved, but it gives us some guidance and some support and some framework that these challenges should be met in a certain way and should be guided by our faith. Again, they could be material, physical challenges, but the fact that tefillah is hishtadlus helps to ground us spiritually, even in the most mundane things in life.
That's very interesting. There's a similar idea. I think it also rhymes with, echoes Rabbi Kisus's idea. And that is that why do we daven if Hashem knows, of course, what it is that we need and what we want? And one explanation, which is more mystical, again, more attuned to, more in line with what Rabbi Kisus said, is that Hashem wants to give us things, but we need to daven for them. Meaning you have this thing coming for you so long as you daven. Like davening unlocks bracha that Hashem wants to give you.
Right.
And so it is hishtadlus. It's a necessary step along the way for Hashem to then give to you that which he wants to give to you.
Yeah, I think just in general that we understand that to be, like you said, Hashem knows what we want. That's not why we daven. We daven because we need to have a relationship with Hashem. And we need to be able to, in the process of creating that relationship, also simultaneously, it unleashes certain pathways and certain opportunities for the bracha or whatever it is that we seek to come our way. Almost like, channels of sorts where Hashem could send it through those because we created them in the first place. But I was just in general hyper-focusing on elements of physical hishtadlut. But that was very profound to bring it through tefillah, especially in the context of the Ramban and how exactly that influences us. So,
and we're not prepared for a broader discussion on the relationship between hishtadlus and success, but undoubtedly there are classical thinkers who conceptualize it differently. I just want our listeners to understand that this is not the only way to think about the relationship between hishtadlus and achieving some means, because I'd have to imagine there's machlokas here.
All right, Rabbi Kisus, bring us home.
Okay, I'm going to touch on the Rashi that you mentioned, Rabbi Goldberg, that Rashi says, Vayishlach Yaakov malachim mamash. Reb Moshe Feinstein has a classic question. Yaakov's primary objective here was to send messengers. But in actuality, he went ahead and sent angels. Malachim mamash, real, proper angels. And the question he asks is that it seems from the text that actual angels and just good old messengers would have accomplished the exact same thing, which then begs the question, why did Yaakov go out of his way to send angels? Why didn't he just send a messenger? He was trying to convey something to Esav, and that could have easily been executed by good old-fashioned messengers. Why did Yaakov have to make a miracle and send Malachim Mamash? Reb Moshe gives such a powerful answer, and it's something that is highly inspirational, and it's a perspective which I think the Gemara also discusses. And that is, says Reb Moshe Feinstein, that for Yaakov, angels and messengers were exactly the same. Because Yaakov reached a level of what he calls tachlit hashlemut, absolute perfection, that when he walked outside and he viewed nature, there was no such thing as nature. He saw Hashem's hand in every aspect of the natural order. And so to him, there was no difference, to strengthen the question he asks, after all, we know that when we call upon it, when we need to use a miracle, so then somehow that takes away our merits. It's nisma'atu zchuyotav. Somehow we lose merits. Why would Yaakov be willing to lose merits just to send angels versus regular people? And the answer is, to Yaakov, when he looked around the world, everything he saw was Hashem's direct influence. And so to him, sending messengers and sending malachim mamash were one and the same. And therefore, he was not losing anything by sending actual messengers. Because when he sent regular messengers, by sending actual angels, because when he sent regular messengers, also at the same time, he recognized the miracle of that. He was able to see the fact that we get from point A to point B without being harmed is in and of itself miraculous. In fact, there's a classic Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin. The Gemara says a story about the daughter of Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa. She went ahead and she prepared the Shabbat candles, but she prepared vinegar. And she was beside herself that, wow, that's terrible. Our family's not going to have Shabbat lights this week. And Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa said, the God that instructs oil to light will instruct vinegar to light. To Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, his level of emunah was such that when he looked out at the world around him, he saw the hand of Hashem. And he recognized that it's not actually oil, which really brings our conversation around. That level of emunah, recognizing that b'tachlit hashlemut, somebody who reaches that level of perfection understands that everything is Hashem. Nothing's me, nothing's the oil, nothing's the vinegar. It is Hashem that's doing everything. And so to Yaakov and to Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa was one and the same. Whether it was lighting oil or sending malachim mamash, it did not matter. Because ultimately it's Hashem that is the sole provider and the sole influencer and motivator behind everything that happens in this world.
It reminds me of what Chazal say about Hagar and the well, that Hashem opened her eyes, right? The well was always there, but because of her predicament, she couldn't see it. And so it may not have even been a miracle that Hashem just created this well. No, the well was always there, but she couldn't see it because of her suffering, and Hashem opened her eyes. Hashem enabled her to see it. And that beautiful idea can help us understand critical component of therapy. Very often, people struggle to understand or to process or to reckon with things that have happened to them. And through therapy, they're able to gain deeper perspective, a different understanding. It's not the only thing that therapy is about, but one of the critical pieces is gaining perspective on things that you didn't have before. And that's what enables you to then thrive, to make your peace or whatever it is. And that's the idea. So I think it works on a spiritual level in terms of how we view the world, but also I think it's one of the powers of being a human being is being able to understand things and appreciate things and gain perspective in different ways.
You know, there's a famous passage that when somebody loses something, they say, Amar Rabbi Ben Yamin,
Yes.
So that's what,
That's
that
the
idea.
Medrash.
That
Same Medrash.
That same
Yeah, it's the Medrash on Hagar, yeah.
So when you just said that, you remind me of the Midrash, and I'll tell you why it reminded me, because a couple of days ago, one of my students came over to me from TABC and said, I lost my wallet. And to quote Rabbi Diamond again, he said, this is foolproof. If you believe when you say, Amar Rabbi Ben Yamin, he said, he's not a Segula type. He's very Litvish, I guess you'd say, in that way as a rabbi. But he pounded this into us, that if you believe when you say the passage of Amar Rabbi Ben Yamin, you will find. So the student tells me.
Do we translate that line for all of our listeners?
Basically, the beginning.
Everyone is by default is blind until Hashem opens their eyes.
So I told my student, come with me. Let's pull it up on the computer and let's say it together. And he doesn't read Hebrew that well, and he struggled through it. And like I was able to see a certain contentness. And then I told him, listen, you have to believe. You have to believe you're going to find the wallet. So it was one of two places. Either it was in the Uber, and he was really concerned that after a couple of days he'd never get it, or it was at his friend's house, but they turned over the entire house and they couldn't find it. And so he was convinced that he may never get it. And I sat there talking to him, telling him, you got to believe. This morning at 7:55 in the morning, he comes running into the Sephardic Minyan, where we have our Sephardic tefillah in TABC. And he's like, I found it. I'm like, where was it? He was like, it was underneath my car. Underneath the seat of my car. So it was right there the whole time. But yep. Hashem said, Hakol b'cheskat sumin. He couldn't see it. When we believe, Hashem allows us to see and accomplish.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
שעשית את עבדך ומכלי עברתי את הירדן אתה הייתי לשני מחנות הצילני